Yes. And then I would like to welcome everybody to this second official session of the Regenerative Learning Sessions. And I want to welcome everybody from different places, different backgrounds, different colors, genders, religions, and those that are already really deep into this subject, those that are new to it. And I want to welcome Natasha as well. I'm super happy that you're here. And Natasha is already part of the Schumacher Institute of Neo-Economics since 2019. She created Stichting Grond van Bestaan, where they wanted to implement community-owned land trust, but in the Dutch context. And she implemented all these practices, or tries to implement it in the Voedselpark Amsterdam right now. And I really would love to give the floor to Natasha. She's going to talk half an hour. And after that, you have half an hour the time to ask your questions. And you could already, if you have questions in between, put them in the chat. And then afterwards, we will go through them all for the time that we have. And then I really would love to give the floor to Natasha. So Natasha, are you ready?
Well, welcome, and thank you for being here and inviting me to give this talk. Nice to see you all. And well, I'm at the moment I'm in just outside of Amsterdam, and working, and I live and work here. And as Laura just said, I'm connected to the Schumacher Center for New Economics, and I've been working on sustainability issues, as we used to call them, for the last 20 years. I think that at some point, I think maybe like 10 years ago, I was working a lot I've always worked on the intersection between economy and ecology. And at some point I realized that the worldview that we were doing sustainable development under, and I was very much involved in biodiversity and ecosystem services and natural capital, and valuing and monetizing ecosystems. I started to realize that wasn't going to help, that bringing nature into the economy wasn't the right way to go about it. So that's when I discovered the commons as a new positive worldview, and I think one of the solutions to creating a new economy. I'm very interested in land and land use, and how can we change the way that we work with land, and how can we sorry, wait 1 minute, I need to mute that, otherwise I'll get loads of wait 1 minute. Oh no, I can't. Sorry. How can we work with land? How do we share land? How do we share all of the different resources that we have? And I think one of the ways to do that is through commons. Let me see. Yes. So as I just said, Schumacher Center, and I think that the economic system that we have at the moment is degrading to people, land, and culture. But we can enhance and dignify it, but it can also be enhancing and dignifying. So I think that building a new economy, and this is from Susan Witt, the director of the Schumacher Center, is at the same time a spiritual task, but it's also necessary as a humanitarian mission. I think that once we see it in local economies around the world, that's when we can see that it's actually happening. So we need a new story. We need a regenerative economy. And how? I think through regenerative design, through regenerative communities, and through strengthening collaboration and co-creation through the commons. These things that I write about and I think about a lot, I also try to bring them into practice, as Laura just said, through 2 different initiatives here in the Netherlands, because I really believe you need to do things where you live. And one of them is Grond van Bestaan, and the other one is Voedselpark Amsterdam. If you don't know them already, please look them up. I work a lot together with David Bollier. He's my colleague at the Schumacher Center. We work on a program called Reinventing the Commons. And the commons is at the same time ancient political tradition with a long history, and at the same time it's being rediscovered. And I'll give you a short introduction into the commons now to give a bit more of an idea of what has it been and what can it be in the future. So a lot of people, and this is one of the hurdles that we have to always bridge, is most people have only heard of the commons within the context of the tragedy of the commons. This is from Garrett Hardin, the biologist. The idea was that if you leave, like for example, grazing animals in a certain area, different farmers use this commons, then there will always inevitably be overgrazing. But often the commons is misunderstood. And what I think that it's been quite invisible, especially in the past 20 years, well, let's say 30 years since the 1990s, and the rise of neoliberalism. It's always been about the state and the market. So on the one hand, we have the state, and the other hand, we have the market. And there is actually a third realm that is the commons, and isn't governed by the state or the market. And I think that what we're trying to do here is emancipating the commons. So actually, I think that what Garrett Hardin spoke of as a tragedy of the commons was not actually a commons, because a commons is a social system where we have certain clear agreements between different parties about how do we use the commons. And what Garrett Hardin was speaking of was actually the tragedy of the unmanaged, laissez-faire common pool resources with easy access for non-communicating self-interested individuals. Since then, Elinor Ostrom, who was the first woman to get the Nobel Prize for Economics, she investigated the commons mainly in indigenous societies and in history. And what she found is that this is the way in which most societies have always dealt with their natural resources, through creating shared agreements and a social system around it. So the commons is not just a resource, but it's the self-organized social system. So I always explain it as being 3 things: a community of the commoners, a resource, the commons, and the social norms and practices around the commons. So these 3 things together are more than just sharing and cooperation. They're actually, they create culture, they create a self-organizing social system. So I think traditionally we've always seen commons as forest, fisheries, farmland, irrigation, water, pastures, wild game. But so at the moment, there are still 2 billion subsistence commoners all over the world. And it's a stable, ecological, benign. So it doesn't, because of the way in which these social systems are structured, it doesn't create any harm. And it's a socially and ecologically benign mode of provisioning. But we can see a lot of new forms of commons emerging as well. So we have agroecology, permaculture, community-supported agriculture, slow food, organic farming, Fresno common. There's so many different examples, and David Bollier has written a lot about these in his books. So, but also a city can also be a commons. So we have urban land trusts, community gardens, data commons, citizens, but also things like Wi-Fi in Barcelona can be a commons. And there are different commons all over the world being in urban contexts being created all over more and more. Also, another form is alternative currencies. They're often used to recirculate community value. So the money is not extracted out of the local community, but is recirculated and regenerative in that way. But also, I think one of the examples that people often see now is data commons and open source software or Wikipedia as examples of data and knowledge commons. There are also things that we call cosmo-local production, so global knowledge sharing for local production. An example is FarmHack, in which they create they share openly all of the different designs around creating farm equipment or other farm hacks, let's say. And these are shared online and are created locally. So the design, the plans, everything is created globally and shared globally, but the production is done locally. And this is probably one of the things that will, in the future, as global supply chains become harder and harder to maintain within the face of all different crises, I think that this is probably a very important form of production. Another form is what's really coming up at the moment, and I think there's a lot of hype around it, but there's also probably, especially if we look at it from a commons perspective, a real commons perspective, I think that there is a lot of possibilities with these new technologies, but I'm not an expert on that, but I can see there's a lot of good things happening around that as well. So, but I think the message is really that commons can arise anywhere or in anything. So I think that one of the main problems that we have around commons is that it's such a different worldview and a different way of thinking that it kind of transcends the left-right divide of politics that we often think about. So it's really about creating a different way of thinking. And David's first book was the Think Like a Commoner. And he once told me that actually, it's taken him 15 years to get rid of, certain ways or conditioning around the way that we've all been brought up. And it's also very much embedded in our language, is to think only within the market system. And if we don't think within the market system, then straight away we're thinking, well, then you must be a communist. But it's also not communism. It's not really an ideology in that way. It's just a basis for value creation, and it's generative. So it's not a tragedy, but it's really a generative value creation. So I think that we have, with commoning, there is definitely a different operational logic and ethos than standard organizations. But we're not saying that it has to replace all business or government or non-profits. It's actually a third realm that could balance the state and the market in that way. So I think also that the commons is very much about experimentation and not ideology. So it's not an ism. So it's about relationships and social practice and not about price. And mainly and very importantly, there is no commons without commoning. So the social processes and the relations between the different groups are the most important part of it. So I think that one of the things that we're trying to develop at the moment within a research project that David and I have been working on for many years, it's about what is a different theory of value, because that's very much, and how do we describe that? Because the commons assert a different universe of value than standard economics. And it's all about, as you can see here, fairness, responsibility, inalienability, and decommodification. Inalienability means that it cannot be sold, and decommodification is that it's no longer a commodity. Commodification is when things are brought into things that weren't a commodity before are brought into the market. And decommodification, for example, with land, is when you take land out of the market and make it impossible to be sold again. And that's what a community land trust does, for example. It's very much about the long term. So for stewardship over many generations, for future generations, and it's very much about bottom-up rulemaking. So, and because commons are often very much embedded in tradition, it's about customs and traditions, and it is also about basic needs. One of the, if you kind of juxtapose it or put it next to the normal thinking and economics, and this is what the feminist economic theory of J.K. Gibson Graham showed, was that it's very much about, if you look at standard economics, it's only about the tip of the iceberg. So wage, labor, producers for a market in a capitalist firm. But if you look at society, and that's what, for example, Margaret Thatcher once said, there is no such a thing as society, then then you see that the whole society and many of these things are commons already, are underneath this, what we see as the standard economy and formal markets. So they're mostly invisible and are seen as inconsequential, so not important by standard economics, and also often seen as externalities. With relationalized finance, this is what we call either commons-based or relationalized finance. I think that what we're trying to achieve is that it is regenerative by design. So how do you finance initiatives, and now I know this was a lot of theory, but trying to bring it back to the everyday practice. So how do we finance to support commoning when it's outside of the market? I think that's an important question, and one of the biggest barriers really to commons, to creating commons, is that the finance is not there. And how do we do that? So I think that commons-based finance is about developing value through relationships. And that's why we call it relationalized finance. It's about supporting the processes of commoning and stewardship of care wealth. But this also entails a mind shift. So a few examples that we've already mentioned before is, for example, the community-supported agriculture is a way in which is actually an example of relationalized finance. So you pay, and we have some examples in the Netherlands, also here at the border, but it's a movement that is becoming larger. It makes it possible for households to support farmers by taking part of the risk and the benefit of local organic farming. And in community land trusts, we decommodify land for perpetuity, forever, and therefore making it possible, because you take away the land price and also the land debt, you make it possible to make housing affordable, to make cultural practices affordable, but also at the moment, a lot of regenerative farmers, their main barrier to going, and also for existing farmers, one of the main barriers is the amount of debt that they have, or they don't have access to land. So their regenerative farming practices cannot make them a living because of the debt on the land. But if you take the land out of the market and no longer have these debts, then it's possible to have more ecological and social practices in farming. Another one is time banking and mutual credit systems, in which we help people to provide meaningful care and services to each other without using conventional money. There's also examples of that, but also through a lot of new technology, it's possible to now use all kinds of platform economy, platform cooperatives, sorry, to do things that weren't possible before with larger groups of people. So I think that today our perspective is very much one of market capitalism. So value is price and money. Progress is commodification and privatization. And free trade is extraction and dispossession. And but global capital is still continuing the enclosure of the commons, and there is also a lot of resistance to commoners. The state very much subsidizes companies, but I think through a public, we know a lot about public-private partnerships, but I think that we need to move towards public commons partnerships. So yeah, it's still happening in Africa, in Asia, and all over the world. A lot of land is being commodified and enclosed. But also things like the human genome, space, seeds, parks, wilderness, things that were no longer, capitalism has a way in which it spreads to, looks for the next market continually. So commons is world making and not primarily economic. And one of the ways in which we can understand commons is, well, this is from Free, Fair and Alive. I won't go into this too much at the moment, but it shows the triad of commoning, that it's a combination of social life, provisioning services, and peer governance, so governed by the commoners themselves. But we also should, shed old vocabularies and concepts. So a lot of it's very much ingrained in our way of talking and thinking. In our language is very much informed by the capitalist system in which we exist at the moment. So we do need to find new words to also create this new story. And how do we scale? Because that's what a lot of people worry about, is like, how do you scale? How do we make sure that, you know, we're sitting in an ecological crisis? How do we make sure that these things go quick enough or big enough or fast enough? And I think that, you know, there's only so much that you can scale commons, but we can emulate and federate. So it's very much about creating infrastructure for commoning, and also commons public partnerships, as I just mentioned. And emulate is copying, and federate is to create new local commons that we can learn from every commons. So as this is a Dutch artist or a Belgian artist that said, the next big thing will be a lot of small things. And I very much believe that. I believe that, you know, if we want to tackle the environmental crisis, we will need to do that from a bottom-up perspective. And because otherwise there's too much resistance to do it from a technocratic top-down. And we've tried that for many years now. For the past 20 years, we've been trying to convince people to do things differently. And I think that we can only do that from a bottom-up local perspective. And there's a lot of different local transnational movements and local movements that are very much in line with this. So, you know, the degrowth movement, agroecology, the platform cooperatives. And yeah, I see that now we're half an hour further. I wanted to just quickly share with you this idea, but maybe it's an activity that I did during the session at the Regeneratie manifestatie, and it's from my friend Damaris Matthijssen, and she gives really interesting courses to groups of people who would like to, with her organization called the Economy Transformers, to people who would like to live and practice their lives within the new economy. And even though she doesn't come completely from a commons perspective, I think it's very much in line with what we've been talking about. So she created this tool that is called the 6 keys, and you can use it to look at any different skill level for your own initiative, because I know that a lot of people here are working on their own initiatives, and you know, a lot of people are working to create their own initiatives. And I also was in her work group called the WEEG, that's werkgroep Eigentijds Eigendom van Grond, or new forms of land ownership. So I think that you know, through looking at this through a holistic perspective, we can see that, you know, are we using when we're creating an initiative, are we actually looking at it from all different angles? I think so. I've written it down just to did a quick sketch here, where the top is I am. I think I will just quickly show you this. Wait 1 minute. Yeah. So if we go through this these 6 keys, and you start with I am at the top, this is about what is your essence, what is the underlying motive or motives, what is the identity of your organization or your initiative, what is the big why behind it? So when that's always where you start. And then when you go to the next one, it's very much about value. Like, what is my organization producing? What is the products? What are the services? What is the structure? Is there a cooperation in the value chain? What do the agreements look like within the value chain? Where is the profit in the value chain? Who gives, who takes? Which non-financial value is created? Who bears the investment risks? And is there any other way? And then finally, property. So experience and insights is around property, goods, but also inputs, factors of the economy. Where is land, labor, and capital, such as money, stocks, patents, intellectual property? Who owns the property of your organization, your initiative? And I think this is often those 3 points that I just mentioned now is very much the old economy. And a lot of new initiatives are about the upside down triangle. So it's very much about the organization. So for and with whom are you organizing? What is the legal forms? Well, that's one of the things that is often quite difficult. Where is the formal power and decision making? How do we get from a pyramid structure to a more horizontal organizational form? And the other one is relation. So what story do you tell? How do you listen? In what way do you make connections, and with whom? And then the key 6 is the earth. Do you care for the earth? What is the reality, natural growth and dimensions, importance of diversity in the system? So I think that a lot of maybe new social entrepreneurs, they often look at they look at the organization, the relation, and the earth. That's like the new economy, or more social entrepreneurs do that, but they don't look at the combination of the two. So I think that it's a really interesting exercise, and I've done it before myself, in which you go through all of these 6 keys for your initiative. And it's, too much time now to do that with a group, but I would recommend to look into that a little bit more. Sorry, I think that didn't really, it's just a little taster of what Damaris does for her work and how you could maybe bring commons into your own life. And aside from that, David has written quite a few books that you can learn more about commons and commoning, especially the last 2, Free, Fair and Alive, but also the Commoners Catalogue for Change Making. Both of them are online, so you can also access them for free. The Commoners Catalogue is interesting because there's a lot of examples, and it's quite hard to wrap your mind around it without having these good examples. And here, this is Damaris's new book is coming out halfway through October. And as I said, on her website, Economy Transformers, there's also different courses around this topic. Here's my the different websites, organizations that I work for. And if you want to send me an email, feel free. Okay, I hope that.
Thanks so much, Natasha. I think the last slides, I don't know if you had slides, but we still see the star.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I was not sure if you were showing, that one, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was doing it on the other.
No, okay. I'm not sure about it. But...
This doesn't matter, but here, I'll just show you the books.
Look, yeah, perfect.
And also...
nice, this is Damaris, no?
This is Damaris and her books. And these are my... the different websites, and also my email address.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yeah, we will also put this on YouTube so people can watch it back. So if you also want to see the keys and different things, the books that Natasha showed, you can see them there. And thanks so much, Natasha, for your story. It's really, really interesting. this new way of looking at it. And I got already some questions. The first question was from Vincent. Vince, you want to ask a question yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was related to the quotes that you had, or the sentences like commons can rise anywhere and commons are regenerative by design.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you can give us examples of what you consider regenerative in commons.
Yeah. Well, I think that, well, the examples, the main examples that I mentioned before, for example, community-supported agriculture, I think that they are regenerative by design because they are financially regenerative, so there's no extraction by larger firms. I think that that's one of the main key characteristics of the commons, is that there is no extraction of value. So the value will go back into the commons and also make the commons stronger in that way. So in that way, it's financially regenerative, not just sustainable. It can also, if it's a successful commons, it will grow in that way, or you will create a second commons, or you can have a solidarity fund in which you pay money into a different commons to help them to grow. And regenerative as a community, so socially, I think you create social relations, and also you work together. It strengthens community in that way, and that's why it's socially regenerative and ecologically regenerative, because when you work together in that way with the land, and people want to make it possible for the farmer to be regenerative with the soil and not to extract too much from the soil, in that way it can be ecologically regenerative. So in that way, I think in three different ways, financially, socially, and ecologically, commons are regenerative.
Thanks.
So that answers your question, no, Vince? Also about ecological, because after that you put like that, yeah, if a common group maybe can a commons group also do like degrading agriculture, like an old-fashioned agricultural system? I think that was a little bit your question, no?
Yeah.
Well, there was there was a question of Inge. She said, like, can you give examples? So for me, a common, but maybe that's why I was curious, because if you have a community that has certain commons that they share, or that is like the value exchange that is happening inside a community, that can also be degenerative or extractive. So that's why I was a bit curious on Natasha's view on what the regenerative aspect is of commons.
Yeah, I think one of the things that for example, Eleanor Ostrom and other researchers have found that it's actually a very effective way of stewarding resources or land or water or any kind of, because it's mostly for the long term, and commons will have a longer term perspective mostly than if there is a market. So we're kind of setting it next to a market system. And with the state system, originally, of course, all states, especially local government, were commons in a way. But through the way in which they have moved very close to markets, their main interest is no longer as much aligned with local communities. So in that way, and also very much dependent on political ideology, while the local community will be more reliant on the commons, and therefore would deal with it in a better way. That is the theory. and also has been researched in that way. Was that also what Inge wanted to say? Because I think there are of course, you shouldn't confuse commons with cooperatives, for example. I mean, there are a cooperative is not a commons. A cooperative can be a commons, but it's not necessarily a commons. Yeah.
Thanks. And then we have a question from Stefan. Are you here? Do you want to ask a question yourself, Stefan?
Yes, thanks. I'm here. Yeah, I was wondering if you guys are aware of the upcoming EU laws for sustainability, because there are quite a few coming. And a big one is the EU green taxonomy, because in essence, that's a very long list of economic practices and the guidelines that are required to get an official label from them as like sustainable. But the advantage of this is that it's like EU-wide, so it's very recognizable. And I feel like these regenerative common ideas could easily get these. So I was wondering if you guys are aware of that, and if so, are you thinking about that?
No, I haven't. I have heard of it, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how it works.
Yeah, of course. It's actually a lot of things, but it mainly has two purposes. In the first place, it's a very long list of economic activities and an even longer list of requirements. And if a group or a company or something performs such an activity and they can prove they fulfill these requirements, they can get a label saying like, okay, yes, yeah, I am sustainable, I follow this green taxonomy, which on the one hand means they can have this very high standard label that's at least internationally within the EU recognized. So that could serve as a market or a form of proof, like, yes, we are very regenerative or sustainable. And the other part is that it's for banks and very large corporations, it will be mandatory for them to prove that they are also active in it within this green taxonomy, which could be through promotion or investing in such startups.
Okay.
So I was thinking, it could be interesting, depending, of course, on the circumstance, to get the label for a few startups or
commons
locations.
Yeah.
And then they could at least wear it as like, yes, we are very sustainable, as a mark, as a version of proof, and or possibly use that to get some funding.
Yeah, my experience is that often commons don't fit within these taxonomies as much as they should, but yeah, I'll look into it. Thanks. That's
yeah, Fons shared here the link in the chat.
Yeah.
So you can get up there.
Yeah, so if I can actually comment on that. So my name is Fons. I work for the European Climate Pact, which is the social program of the European Green Deal. And indeed, what Natasha says, it's mainly like within this capitalistic framework. Right? So if you have what the EU wanted is to at least have clarity about, hey, what is for sure not sustainable, and make sure that is also that people cannot greenwash with it. For instance, preventing emissions if you want to have an innovation in a coal power plant, that cannot be advertised as green as a green investment for banks. Of course, there are debatable elements in it, like nuclear energy and gas or CCS, but at least, let's say, apart from that, there are 100 good things that are now cleared out by the EU taxonomy. But when it comes to the financial model of commons, yeah, it requires different types of approaches, because also financial models within commons are not indeed within this capitalist framework, as Natasha has told me. But at least it's an improvement in our wider society.
I think it just depends, because I don't know if you as a commons have to register with, for example, Gamma from GoPalm, but if you do, then you could apply for this.
Yeah.
Even though it would not fit.
It's still a label that you can put. So indeed, if you have big projects of millions, and you want to make them bankable, so you want to still to go to a private bank, it helps because such bank doesn't have a requirement to have a green portfolio, because the targets from the European Union towards national banks will be higher and higher eventually through the years. So in that way, it could help. But I think in many cases with common projects, it's not also in the scale. So you really need to then to bundle common projects in order to make them bankable for such institutions.
Well, we have looked into that, and I think that there is probably quite a lot to be said about bundling different commons in that way to make them more investable. But the problem with getting investment is often the way in which investments themselves can be quite extractive. So I think that there is a lot of potential with progressive finance, and until now they haven't really been able to, or ethical finance or sustainable finance. They have made a lot of things possible, but they've also still operating very much within the capitalist framework, so impact investing and so on. So for commons, I think we do need to look at other ways of investing, and maybe lending, small lending, low interest, that kind of thing. But also a lot of it is about creating crowdfunding initiatives. And I think that things like Land van Ons, Terdelian, also Aardpeer in the Netherlands, this is a movement, but also in Germany, this is a movement that is not about return on financial investment, but return on ecological and social investment is above the financial investment. I mean, in some cases you will get your investment back, and in other ways it will be more about gifting money to get to go towards a more sustainable, regenerative economy. So I think we need to think about investment in a different way in general. And the EU is well, I mean, when the interest rates were very low in the past years, there was a potential maybe for the European Investment Bank to invest in these kind of initiatives. But with the interest rates rising, it becomes more problematic. Yeah. Any other questions?
Is there anybody with another prangende vraag, a question? Yeah, then I was maybe curious to just to see it a little bit more in practice. Like, could you explain a little bit, Natasha, with, for instance, Voedselpark Amsterdam?
Yeah.
Like how you implement the commons there, so you get like a more practical view over how this works in real life. Is that possible?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, with Voedselpark Amsterdam, I mean, we're trying to save the Lutkemeerpolder. And this is, I think, one of the things that why we really wanted to attempt this is because there is a large community around it. It's been going now for the last I've been involved since 2018. And what happened is that the land is owned by the gemeente, really, by the municipality of Amsterdam, and that makes it public land in a way. But they have placed a more private entity in between, and they are shareholders. So the Schiphol Area Development Company is the organization that is doing the development. So one of the reasons why we thought we could take a commons approach to this, and why we think it's so important, is because it's one of the last fertile pieces of land around the city. So we see it as a potential to create so many positive ways in which we can deal with the local food, climate, biodiversity, social and affordable food for people from New West. I think a lot of these things that we saw so much potential there, and because of the community that's quite active, we decided that, you know, through creating a crowdfunding, we could potentially show the city government that there isn't just people who are willing to put their sign the petition, but also are willing to put their money in. And what we've seen is that we have now 5,000 people who have contributed 450,000 euros. And that's been in the last 6 months. So if you look at the population of Amsterdam, and especially also the people who are interested in these kind of things, I think that there is so much more potential. People have just wanted to gift their money. On average, it's about 100 euros per person, but there's also a lot of people who have put in 1,000 euros or more. Without a clear transactional or return on investment in that way, except for the fact that they know that they're creating something for the community. So I think that this is quite a good example of a way in which you can create commons-based finance by showing there's a certain type of urgency, and also people want to create places like this that are not all about markets or capitalism, but also to be clear, I'm not against innovation or entrepreneurs. I just think that, certain things should be in the commons in that way. And that by creating commons, we're also creating more room for entrepreneurial endeavors and regenerative entrepreneurs in that way, or farmers, or any kind of people who want to create that, a different way of living or life. With Futsal Park, we really see that we're creating a community, and the people are very active. And yesterday we were with a whole group of experts, and through that we want to show the rest of. And we had a big meeting in Pakhuis de Zwijgen with 200 people who turned up, and they were all very. I mean, they didn't want one futsal park. They wanted 4 futsal parks. So it shows that we don't have to wait for. I think that's one of the key messages of Commons, is that you don't have to wait for the government to do things. You can do it. We can do it ourselves. It's empowering in that way. We haven't, of course, we're not. The futsal park is nowhere. We don't know if it's going to happen, but we are showing everyone that, and also especially the municipality, we're showing them that there is, people in the city, they want to do things differently. Yeah. So, any support that, not just financially, but any support from the people here is very welcome as well. And we're a volunteer organization.
Thanks so much. Yeah. How could people help out with that? Natasha, do you have a clear?
Yes, we have a whole group of volunteers. We have different working groups. We have a legal working group, so a financial working group, communication and campaigning working group, activities, and also lobby and politics working group. So if you have any experience or expertise on this, then get in contact with us. And if not, then you can also always contribute to the crowdfunding. And also Land van Ons is also one of our partners, has also said that they will help to buy the land once it becomes available, once the city decides that they want to go for it. And at the same time, also, if we do get that far, then of course we're also looking for entrepreneurial people, farmers, regenerative farmers, and other people who would like to set up an initiative there.
That would be really, really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make it happen. Maybe you can put your email again in the chat, so people, if they want to reach you, have to see the YouTube video, they can go directly.
Yeah, I'll send them. I'll put my email in the chat here. And if there was any more questions. No, I can understand it's quite dense, the the slides, and it's always a little bit more difficult to talk to a screen, I always find myself. So
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for all the work and to compliment you about the whole campaign around the Voedselpark Amsterdam. And I contributed as well. And at the Pollinators, we are organizing a crowdfunding as well at the moment for Tree Venmar to unite all the food forests. And we were looking at the campaign of Voedselpark Amsterdam, like, wow, how do they, I mean, you create such a momentum, and yeah, it's beautiful. So
thank you. Oh, that's great. Thanks to hear. And I also love the work that the Pollinators are doing. So yeah, and Tom van der Beek is also one of our ambassadors.
Ah, yeah, of course he is. Yeah.
I wanted to say exactly the same thing. Yeah. Of course he is.
I was just like, nice.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you all. Yeah. And, you know, yeah, hope to see you one time in real life.
We're going to make that happen. Yeah. So let's go to an end because it's also past. So yeah, thanks so much, Natasha, for what Tosca already said, like for the really great work and really putting your heart in the comments, because I really see that like every time I'm talking to you or all the posts that I see on LinkedIn, or like everything is comments. So you're really embodying that. I really love that. So yeah, I really love to hear your story, and I'm having way more questions, but I also feel that we're gonna work together in the future a lot. So this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And for everybody, this session is part of the regenerative session as reeks, hoe zeg je dat? And we have that every first Friday of the month. So next Friday will be the 7th of October. And we're gonna talk with Peter den Hond over building with nature. He is one of the referents in Amsterdam for COP building, but he's also building with living structures. So with trees itself, and you met him as well, Natasha.
Yeah, I love his work. You should come and look at in the Lutkemeerpolder. Actually, there is one of his structures now. It's a little eco house made with straw and loam. And actually, I also wanted to invite you all for the 17th of September. There's a harvest Oogstfeest harvest festival in the Lutkemeerpolder. So nice. If you look on the website, yeah, it's that's with Pluk, and also, you know, you can see Peter den Hond's beautiful house they built.
Yeah, and then we also have, so I think the regenerative agenda is already filling up. The 24th of September, we're going to have an action day. So we do these online sessions, but we also do the offline sessions. And there you can really put your hands in the dirt, learn about fermentation, and it's going to be at Weerwoud. So if you go to our website, you can see it there. And they're just really nice because it's physical. So we can meet each other, see each other. And yeah, this is all part of our 10-year campaign from the Regenerative Coöperatie to let flourish and grow the regenerative movement in the Netherlands and beyond. And there's already some people here from, thanks Vince, I was typing it, but yeah, perfect. There you see the website. So if you also really want to put your shoulders underneath the regenerative movement, be part of it, work on it together, check out the website, reach out to us, and come to the next action day or the next regenerative learning session. And yeah, then I want to wish you all a really beautiful weekend and see you all soon. So I
thank you.
Mics and just do a shout out, and yeah. See you all the next one.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Yes.
Hi, I wanted to ask if the workshop about fermentation will be in English or in Dutch?
1 second, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to answer your question.